We are talking with the Killer Queens on this Halloween. Thank you both for coming on. They're sisters. They do the Killer Queens podcast. It's a true crime podcast. Tyrella Slemp is one sister. Tori Brothers is another. She's married at one time. They were the sisters brothers. Or the brothers sisters. And thank you both for coming on. Listen, I wanted to give some of our viewers just a little background. I know many people watching are familiar with you, but what you do really sounds like what a lot of us do in the field of journalism, covering and digging deep, maybe for more documentaries. Either one of you did you go into school with this pursuit? Is this something that you went to school to study, or it was just a natural interest you turned into a career?
Just a natural interest, yeah.
Just sort of.
What were your jobs before you started doing this podcast?
Well, you did hair for how many years?
Okay. Yeah, I did hair for, I think, 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've done a few things. I've run a medical office.
But nothing in this realm. You both just had a real healthy interest in this. You're both good communicators, and you both have the ability to research.
Right.
I mean, that's really the key.
Yeah.
If you guys got on there and didn't know what you talked about, people figure that out real quick.
Oh, yes.
And so you really do. Does it surprise you at all when you think where you are right now? I mean, you've quit your other jobs, right?
Right, yeah.
Yes.
It surprises us literally every day. Like, we're just like, how did this happen?
And they were saying in the first segment about how, they really started doing this, talking around the dinner table with their dad. What does he think that you have this podcast that's just taken off?
He thinks it's amazing.
He's so proud.
Yeah, so proud.
He should be. I mean, that you've turned a real interest. Now, you both had an interest, so I guess where you come from is why there's this popularity. You talked about your personal interests and what kind of cases you like, but what do you think? Is it the same thing that grabs people's interest for true crime? What's this fascination with true crime in your opinion, and how you feed that?
I think I can't speak to, I don't know, male experience, but I think for a lot of women especially, I'm kind of this way. I feel a little bit more like if I know what's out there, then I can maybe avoid it, which is not necessarily true, but just because my husband all the time is like, because I'm a scaredy cat. I can't stay at home by myself.
It's insane that this is her job because she's terrified of everything.
I'm literally terrified of everything. So he's like, I don't understand why you keep doing this. And I'm like, well, every time, like, I'll hear something in a case and I'm like, okay, I need to watch out for that. Or, okay, when I'm by myself, I do this. Or, so I think for some people, it's the more you know, like, trying to.
I agree. And are you saying you think it's probably a mixed bag, but you think you mostly have female listeners?
Mostly. When we first started, we definitely were like 90-10 skew female, but we are
expanding.
About 60-40. I mean, we're definitely getting more male listeners. We're a little crass, I would say, sometimes.
Oh,
we can hang with the men.
Well, and you guys put warnings sometimes beforehand saying not just the language, but also the subject matter can be pretty darn graphic. It can be sexual in nature. It's obviously very violent, those lights. Now, how about you then? So she talks about, maybe the fact that women and others like to know what's going on, maybe so they can avoid it. Do you think that's what drives it from your perspective?
Well, that's not my experience.
Okay, so what's yours then? I mean, and I'm sure there's a varied one. Yeah, sure.
Well, because we're like polar opposites when it comes to our fears like that. Like, Tyrella thinks that everybody is going to murder her at all times. That's what she thinks.
100%, yeah.
I am like, well, if it happens, like, okay, whatever, relax. Because she worries enough for everybody.
She walks around paranoid? Are you watching it? Really? Ken Moore?
Yeah, all the time.
Well, I guess when you follow a lot of this stuff, maybe it can scare you a bit. But in the meantime, you realize this doesn't happen every day, right?
Yeah.
But so for you, you're like, what's the fascination then?
I literally think, it's definitely really interesting to the whole, like, solving a mystery or, trying to figure out who did it. But the why, for me, is really interesting. And I just think it's, I guess, sociology, like, it's really interesting to me to try to figure out, like, how somebody gets here. The certain shows, they'll talk about, there were signs, he was a normal guy, but then there were signs, right? Yeah. That is so interesting to me.
Me too.
Like, and there are statistics like 1 in 10 people are sociopaths. Like, that kind of stuff really drives my interest for it. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way that way, and I cover a lot of this stuff and see the horrible part of it. And I'm not paranoid to that point, but I know it can happen. But I'm kind of the same way as you with the interest in figuring why it happened, and maybe ways to learn to look for the red flags.
Yes. Right.
But well, let's take a quick phone call. I've got some follow-ups, of course, but let's go to James. James, good morning. Hi, James.
Good morning, guys. Good morning, young ladies.
Good morning.
How are y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
Fine. I love the banter back and forth, man. I am a fan. You guys are funny, quick-witted. I love how you come up with your phrases like talk to the hand because the face ain't listening. That's funny.
Thank you.
So you listen. Have you been listening to them for a while?
No, I caught them the other on the news and have try and catch up. They're very good.
Yeah, you're like me on that. I was frank with them. I've listened to some, but I wasn't as up to speed. But if you're just getting started now, there's like 500 episodes out there you can listen to. It's fantastic. James, I mean, thank you for that. Yeah, that's part of it, I guess. The two of you obviously are sisters, so you have chemistry.
Yes.
That helps, right?
It does.
I mean,
We've got that kind of like the banter back and forth. We've always given each other a hard time, you know, and
like ribbing each other.
We have worked together before, like at the salon we worked at. All of the women that we worked with, they were like, y'all need to have a TV show because y'all are just always picking at each other or whatever. So we were like, okay.
Yeah, and it works. And not everyone can pull that off. I wonder when you cover these, and you delve into a lot of the details the way you do, it's not superficial, so you get into it. I don't know, for me, especially if I'm covering a trial or some of these cases like Holly Bobo, and I've been out at crime scenes before and seen some horrible things, but it's like, does that ever get you down? I mean, just by delving into it. I know it's the real thing, but I mean, that's what you do. It's every day. You see that, and you're delving in, you're reading these court records with maybe some horrible details. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, especially child cases are very, very difficult. And we have, because we have so many shows every week, and the way that we kind of like, we have our recording schedule set up, our writers will choose what they want to do, and then they'll put it on there. And we have recently in the last 6 months realized we have to really pay attention to what falls on what week, because there was one week we had 3 child murder cases. Okay. And it was just...
You just don't need those all in a row.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's too much.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you try to do cases, I know you've gone back to visit some high-profile past cases. You even did one on Columbine, right? Columbine shooting. Going back. But, I mean, do you seek now to try to do them that are more current, or another one? I mean, I'm just wondering, when I say current, meaning something that's happened within the last year or two,
right?
Do you seek to try to do that if
Not
you can? Or
necessarily. I mean,
if it's in the news right now, or if it's a big story that's hitting the news nationally or even around here, is that one that'll get your attention? Say, we saw that, let's delve into it?
Sometimes. Yeah. I feel like sometimes those are difficult when they're happening in real time, because we don't know what we don't know yet.
Because I guess I meant maybe after, well, like for instance, let's talk then about like Holly Bobo. That's one of them that you've done, and that was a few years back, but it's not that far removed.
Sure.
Right.
Okay, so how did you get onto that one? Is that one that, someone suggested, or you live locally and you saw some of the coverage and thought, well, this one, young nurse murdered, horrible case, finally goes to trial when they find some of her remains?
Yeah,
I think the answer is yes. It's, all of the above.
I remember when that case happened, and just like, it was just so tragic and awful, and it was in the news all the time. And then we do have a lot of local listeners too, and so we started getting some messages about it, and I was like, how have we not covered this yet? Like, it's our hometown case, essentially.
Oh, yeah. And I'm trying, like we mentioned Jennifer Wicks, that case going back, was it a couple decades, or we just recently ran an update because I think she and her infant or baby had never been found.
Never been found.
Ever. So that's one of those where, I guess no arrest really, and it's a mystery. That's kind of what gets you. And maybe if you do a hit on that, it produces some tips. I don't know if it has.
Right. Yeah. We've had a couple times we've had somebody send some information, and we've definitely heard about that with other shows, though. I mean, if you look at like the Kristen Smart case, which he's finally been convicted, the guy, I think his name is Chris Lambert, who did Your Own Backyard. I mean, it was his hometown case. He did an entire series on it, not just one episode, a whole podcast on it.
Sure.
And it can make movement in cases.
Yeah.
It can trigger people. Oh, I saw something, I didn't think it was a big deal.
Right, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that's why we do updates sometimes in newscasts on cases that have been cold for a while, like Marsha Trimble, cases like that locally. One of the most popular cases or TV shows right now, and I remember following it, was the Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
Have you guys watched any of that?
I haven't watched any of the new. I've seen a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but I mean,
on him,
talking about true crime and the details and the Dahmer, and it's been a very popular show for people to watch of late. Just going over it. That one to me, I haven't watched it. I'm sure it's well done, and I don't know about our viewers. I don't want to live through that again.
Exactly.
Oh, that's why.
It's
Yeah.
a lot.
So are there some cases then, like Dahmer, where you're talking about murder and cannibalism and I mean, are there some cases that you'll look at that come to you where you're just like, I just don't see us talking about this one?
Oh, absolutely.
That you'll pass on?
Dahmer is the
we've
Okay,
never
I
covered
figured that because
it,
you've done some hyper. That was one. So talk about that. Yeah, I mean that one. Everyone's heard about that, and it's just.
Yeah, we just don't feel like we have anything else to really add to it. I mean,
Ted Bundy's another one.
Ted Bundy, it's just they've been done.
Part of it is that there's been so much
over.
done on it, but also that level of subject matter. I don't know, like Dahmer, Ted Bundy, Charles Manson.
We have
We did
done.
do Charles
We did
Manson.
Charles
Yeah,
Manson.
we recently did. Yeah.
I have a weird fascination with, I guess a lot of people do, with cults in general. It's very
okay.
how and why and
Right. Yeah. And we did. There's a docu-series on HBO called The Way Down, right?
it sure is.
Have you the Remnant Church in
Oh
Brentwood?
well, yeah. Our Phil Williams did our investigative
Yes.
report.
Yes. He was in it.
Yeah. He did a ton of those stories breaking that with Gwen Shamblin. Have you done that one now?
We
Yes.
did. So we did that on our Patreon, and we actually covered the documentary itself. So we kind of went like episode by episode.
Yeah.
And it's hard to talk about Gwen Shamblin in
Not her
audio
hair.
because you have to see her hair. Yeah.
Yep.
I was gonna say
You gotta see her hair, but
Right, exactly. That's where something with TV. Like I said, Phil Williams, our I team, did a bunch of those stories. Of course, before that plane crash and all this, and then you're right, he was in this. The docu-series. There's so much out there. We have to take another break. When we come back, we'll talk to maybe some more about some of the cases that you've done, and maybe I'll have some suggestions for you for some pretty cool, not cool, awful cases, but ones that you might want to look into locally that you haven't touched on yet. There's a few
Yes.
out there. It's in your own backyard. We can take a few more calls if you'd like. More of our conversation with the Killer Queens on this Halloween right after this.